they're lying to you. Wall Street is lying to you. I'm a trillionaire in Zimbabwe, but what can I buy with that? Absolutely nothing. People get blinded by numbers. That's what inflation causes. You'll hear, oh, the strong dollar, or that's a distraction as well.
I saw this meme the other day that was like, that's literally the easiest part, is finding the man. You talked about being a single mom when they were 3. Did you ever get remarried?
I was too busy raising them.
Clearly a well-educated lady who totally understands what's going on, and this is a decision that you have made.
I'm here sharing inspiring stories about fearless entrepreneurial women to help encourage you to live your life unapologetically. I'm your host, Heather Blankenship. Welcome to the Unapologetically Me podcast.
On today's episode, I have Miss Lynette Zang, who is an amazing lady who was learning about finance before women were in this space. She is 70 years old and has had a career that has been jam-packed with anything from the stock market to investing in gold, learning all about different types of commodities. This lady is a massive wealth of knowledge, and she did this all while raising twins by herself. Spoiler alert, she also has a prepper farm that includes chickens and all sorts of things. Let's get into it. Lynette, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here, Heather. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you are the absolute queen of gold and silver, which I was looking for somebody to talk to my women's group about this, and a lot of the people who talk about it really aren't that interesting. And when you came on and you were explaining to us exactly how much money works, I had never actually heard it explained that way. Can you talk us through that a little bit, how the banking system works and things like that?
Well, how the banking system works or how everything is breaking down, but I'd rather go to what is money because people do not really understand it. It should be taught in grade school. But money originally was supposed to have 4 functions: a tool of measure, a tool of barter, a short-term store of value to make sure that you are fairly paid for your labor, and a long-term store of value so that no matter when you use it, you are still being fairly paid for the labor that created it. But once the problem on that system for governments and central banks is that if they tax you, you know it. And they don't really want you to know how much you're really being taxed. So 1913, they came up with a system, and it's called fiat money. And fiat, just the literal translation, is by decree. So this is the government-based money that the whole world is operating on at the moment, right? But they have inflation baked into it because it's based on debt. And when you take on debt, what do you have? You have interest rates, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that inflation. And I'm sure people have heard about that inflation tax, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when they created this system, they knew that not one man or woman in a million understands inflation. So they hide that invisible tax through inflation. I'm old enough to remember in the 70s when we transitioned to a pure debt-based system, that inflation was running rampant. I mean, we're seeing a lot of the chaos today that we saw back in the 70s when we were making that previous transition. So wars, women's rights, civil rights, high inflation, lots of chaos. So look over here, look all around. Exactly.
And so for the listeners who don't follow gold and silver and aren't familiar with this, tell us what you mean, break it down to an elementary level on that inflation tax. Because we all hear inflation, right? Eggs are so freaking expensive, right?
Yeah.
You get to hear like those like trending topics, but tell us what that actually means when we're talking about an inflation tax.
Well, I would like you to think about money, the dollars in this country, US dollars, right? Where are they really used? One place, right? And it's easy for them to print as much as they want. They just create more and more and more debt, and that creates more and more and more money. And it's pretty easy to do. So the value of everything, every time they print all of this money, the value of all of the money out there goes down. And I'm talking about in terms of purchasing power value, because you'll hear, oh, the strong dollar, or the dollar's weaker or stronger against another currency. That's a distraction as well. That's a trading opportunity. But the one that matters for both of us is that, and for everybody that's listening, everybody that's watching, is that what you can buy with those dollars. And so that inflation tax, I mean, think about it, especially when we're running high inflation and it's noticeable. And you were talking about eggs, which I've heard are going for something like $12 a dozen.
Totally
well,
crazy.
I have backyard chickens. So how many, I don't remember. We just brought a whole bunch into the office to share with everybody.
I love that.
Right? But it is baked into the cake that it will take you more and more dollars. The longer you hold on to those dollars, the less and less that they buy. And that's the inflation tax.
And so you've chosen to combat this with gold and silver.
Well, you do, because
so talk us through that.
Okay. Well, number one, gold and silver are used in every single sector of the global economy. So where dollars are used in one sector, no. So if demand goes away for dollars, you're in trouble. But with gold and silver, they're used in electronics, they're used in space, they're used in solar, manufacturing, in food, the financial system, and on and on and on. So of all assets, they have the broadest base of functionality. They're used everywhere. Additionally, that means that they have the broadest base of demand.
And
right?
so I hear you talk about the gold and silver, and I'm totally on board with you. I buy gold and silver for my kids. My parents give it as gifts to them. It's so much better than like the next greatest toy, right? Because they've forgotten about it by tomorrow. Mm-hmm. However, I'm curious, because you're clearly a really smart businesswoman, do you only buy gold and silver, or are you diversifying with, say, real estate or the stock market or some other avenue, or are you only investing in gold and silver?
Well, for one thing, you have to understand that I've been doing this on some level literally my entire life. Since I was as early as I can remember as 4, and I'm 70.
Oh my gosh.
I've been a banker. I studied business finance in college, and I've been a stockbroker. So I actually have a very high level of comfort, and I definitely consider
so we should stop and like acknowledge that, right? Because I feel like I'm 40, and when we start talking about social media stuff, we're not young for influencers, right?
Right.
And some people will pick on you about your age and like, she's not that hot, and oh my gosh, you're old, stop doing this. And you know what? I'm proud to be 40. Not everybody makes it this far, right?
Right.
And we're healthy, and we're happy, and we're living a life that we want to. But I think we should stop and acknowledge that as a 70-year-old woman, that you were like ahead of the curve. Women in your day.
I always am.
But women in your day were not financially savvy. They weren't in control of their own finances, and they didn't understand the kinds of things that you understand. How did you get interested in that? How did you know to even look?
Well, first of all, I definitely believe, and I'm just getting chills, but I definitely believe that I was born for this moment in time. And so I would say that the universe really trained me. And I don't think, when I look at everything, I started in banking. Well, okay, my uncle was a major antique dealer back east. And so we're talking about in the 60s with the Vietnam War and everything going on, because I was born in 54. And he was my favorite uncle. So he taught me how hard assets, how tangibles actually work. And he'd go into these very wealthy houses, and they'd go, oh, I have these gold coins. Like this. I have these gold coins. I don't know what to do with them. So he would buy them. And I didn't.
I'm sure for pennies on the dollar.
Well, he did probably somewhere around $35 to $45 a piece, because gold was fixed at that time at $35 a piece. Okay. And it was illegal to own more than 5 ounces of gold.
Wow.
So one day my parents and I were at his house, and he took us in his back bedroom, and he goes, come here, I want to show you something. And he had 2 tall floor safes in there, and he opens the doors, and you couldn't fit even one more of these in there. That's how packed they were. And he said to us, Aunt Bertie will be, if something happens to me, Aunt Bertie will be well taken care of for the rest of her life because of what's in these safes. Well, I was 10 at the time, right? So I looked and I saw them.
Oh, it's so crazy how we're impacted by those kinds of things and our relatives. This is so left field, and Ben's gonna laugh at us as he's filming. I was probably 10 years old. My grandmother, she's 80, and she has been this like crazy, she's a psychologist, but she had a GED, and she put herself through college, and I was like 10
woman.
when she was getting that. But I remember at 10 us showing her getting breast implants. And she had like showing us all the stitches and like all the things. And the things that you remember as a kid, you get to remember a safe full of gold. And I'm remembering like my grandmother with her breast implants.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take the safes. I'll take the
So
safes.
it's the way that you like see the world then, right? The things that you
does.
think are important.
Really, it does make a difference even when you don't realize it, because I never really knew the importance of that until one day when I was writing and I said, and if you were alive like I was in 1971, and all of a sudden I went, that's why I saw all of those gold
And do you
coins.
have kids?
I do. I have 2 daughters, twins.
Oh my gosh, how old
And
are
they're
they?
your age. They're
Oh,
43. They're 43, so a little bit older.
And so how did you teach them when they were younger about the importance of things like this?
I'll be honest with you. I was a single mom since they were 3 years old. That's actually how I became a stockbroker, because I had to support them. And even though I was working in banking, it really didn't pay very much. And I had 2 babies to support. So I went, okay, I might as well do that. That looks interesting to me. And it was very interesting. And when I got into that, maybe 3% of all of the stockbrokers were women. And I was at Shearson, which it was a very hard program to get into there. I went there because they had the best training program on the street. And of course, now they're not there anymore. But I learned an awful lot. So you're right. I'm always ahead of the curve, and I always go into industries where there are not very many women, but yet I always find it's like the gold industry too. When I came into the gold industry, which was 2002, there were maybe 1% were female. Well, I was responsible for a lot of the hiring, so that certainly changed. And at Zhang Enterprises, we have men and women. I don't really care. I'm looking for the right people. I don't really care about what their gender is. But yeah, it's just being in the right place at the right time, because I had to understand money.
Listen, y'all, I know today's episode is inspiring, but inspiration alone will never carry us to our ultimate goals. That's why I started the Society of Entrepreneurial Women. It's a mastermind for high-performing female investors and entrepreneurs who are living their lives unapologetically. In a world where most people don't get us, or they try to keep us confined in a small box, the Society exists to turn off the brakes and set you free. We have weekly calls covering investing, wealth building, health, relationships, family, and a whole lot more. We have small tribes to hold each other accountable to our goals. We have in-person, ladies-only retreats to disconnect and drive each other towards our dreams. And most importantly, this is a community where you can be unapologetically you. Celebrate your wins, scream your successes from the top of the rooftop, become best friends with women who get you. We're 3 years in, and I can honestly say my best friends today are all from the Society. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.
So you learn about the gold from your uncle. Mm-hmm. Fast forward, you go to college, and you've got the background
Business
of the finances
finance.
from that. Then you become a banker. You move into stock brokerage.
Right?
What happens next?
That is the beauty part, right? Because all of that other stuff laid the foundation of understanding. But in the 80s, you got to understand this was globalization. Everything was happening in the 80s because we were transitioning from a gold-backed currency into a debt-backed currency. Best time I could have ever been there. Because at that time, you could get a hold of the head of any trading desk. And so one day I stumbled across what were called non-dollar denominated bonds, which are just bonds that are issued in different currencies. And
Which we don't hear about.
well, no, and I'll tell you why in a second. But, back in the day, treasuries were paying maybe 8 3/4 or something like that. So high interest rates at that point. But these bonds, I found a 5-year piece of paper, AAA rated, happened to be a McDonald's bond. I don't know that I would do it today. But back then, 5-year, AAA rated, 12.75%. And I
Wow.
thought, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Wow, short term,
Yeah.
right? Good yield. But they paid in New Zealand dollars. And then the New Zealand dollars translated to US dollars. So I felt like before I would sell that, I needed to understand
Yeah.
it. And that's what moved me into understanding currencies, right? So I just called up
You
the
had
head
this
of
natural progression of
Yeah.
learning. You needed the foundation
100%.
of each thing to get to here.
100%. And I think everybody does, right? Everybody does. And so I called the head of the currency trading, who also happened to be a woman, which was quite unusual. And she and I created this relationship where every single day I would call her up first thing. We'd talk for maybe an hour-ish, and then she'd give me homework. And at night, I'd go home and I'd study about currencies and all of this. Had I not, and I'm telling you, it was a great trade because the New Zealand dollar was a lot weaker against the US dollar. So by the time the currency hit the account and then translated to dollars, we were actually making about 25% on
That's
our
amazing.
money. It was ridiculous. But then all of a sudden Wall Street saw that and they're like, oh, wait a minute. No, we need that. And so then they put it into a mutual fund and you couldn't buy individual bonds before.
There's so much
after
strategy
that.
in this. You need to know
Yeah.
so many pieces of the puzzle to make these decisions.
Well, yes and no. Okay. And the reason why I say yes and no, one of the things that I really try and teach people is how to recognize patterns and when those patterns shift.
Yeah.
Right? Because whenever you see that, you don't even need to understand what the next outcome is. You just need to understand that when a pattern shifts, it means something good or something bad, but it depending upon what's shifting. But it means something. So, you don't have to know a gazillion patterns. You just need to know accumulation patterns, which is just looks like the bottom of a teacup. I mean, and I talk about that all the time. Breakout patterns, breakdown patterns. That's it. That's all you really need to know. And they're not hard. They're not complicated. And they're really, really obvious and easy to spot once you know what they're doing. So that's why I talk about that a lot on my YouTube channel.
So when we go from, you've learned all about this, did you say New Zealand?
The
way the currency works, and you bought this bond, and I assume you get out of it at the end of the 5 years.
Actually, we ended up trading it sooner than that. That was one of the best trades I ever did in my entire career. I'm going to tell you, we made so much fiat money on that. Did I really understand the fiat money system? No, but I do remember the globalization, and I remember saying to myself, I can see some issues around this. And then what happened, we shipped all the jobs offshore, right? We created all these supply chains because corporations could make more money with cheaper labor outside of the US.
So you learn all of this, and now we fast forward to you're 70 years old, and we go back to this original question. Where are you putting your money? Is it all in gold and silver?
Right now, yes. The answer is yes.
And is that age related and phase
No.
of life, or
No.
regardless of your age, that would be your decision?
That, regardless of my age, that's the decision, because during all of my studies on currencies, I noticed that currencies have a life cycle. Duh. Everything has a life cycle. Everything does. You're not going to look at me and say, oh, she's going to be 40. You're not going to look at you and go, oh, wow, you look great for 70, right?
Yeah.
So everything has a life cycle. And if you know what it looks like at those different stages, then you know how to get into the proper position to take advantage of them.
So my question is, again, if we talk about ages and phases of life, you take less risk, you take more risk, you need more cash flow, you need less cash flow. Maybe you're I have 5 kids. So I'm supporting a family. My husband stays at home. So I'm the breadwinner. So my ignorant thought is, if all of my money is in gold, where's my cash flow? Is that where people keep, active income jobs, and then this is where they invest? Like, how do you advise people in that situation?
This is an awesome question because it does depend on your circumstances. And from all of my studies, so I've been studying currency life cycles since 1987, and you see these repeatable patterns. And what we execute at Zhang Enterprises is actually a sound money strategy based on those repeatable patterns. But we put your goals first, your goals and your circumstance. Because if you put all of your money into gold, you're right, it doesn't generate
like monthly,
cash.
how do I pay my bills? Right?
Right,
Yes.
right. So depending upon, like here I am still working and I'm 70. So if you're working, I don't have need of generating income elsewhere because I'm still working.
So you're putting your extra money into the gold,
Yes.
basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And silver as well, right? They perform different functions. So again, it goes back to what are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals? And even for businesses, right? The strategy works. You just have to define what you're trying to accomplish. And it's built in layers, right? So you have the first layer, which is your first line of defense, which would be a certain level of cash. Now, if you're working, you need less of that. If you're not, and you're depending upon your investments for income, you need more of that, right? And so because people will say, well, I'm getting 4% over here. So you're risking 96% for that little teeny 4%. You really need to look at the risk factors because where we are, and there's not one doubt in my mind, and I'll tell you how you can know, regardless of what I say, is we are at the very end of this fiat money experiment. And this is true on a global basis. And so in order to believe me, go in, anybody can do this. Put in your browser, FRED. That's the Federal Reserve Education Department. And when that comes up in the search bar, you put purchasing power of the consumer dollar. And you're going to see, if you look on that left-hand axis, when it started out, yep, it was at $1. But what do they have down at the bottom? A big fat 0, because that's its true fundamental value. And so the stocks going up, real estate going up, those kinds of things taking more and more dollars, is it really that their values have increased or that the value of the currency has decreased?
So let's say a listener's like, okay, Lynette, I'm sold. I want to buy some gold or silver. Mm-hmm. So we see these places, and I'm sure you're going to tell us exactly how, and I think you have a program for that. But I'm curious, and I want to hear all about that. But I'm curious, you see the places that are like, we buy gold, we buy silver, right? They're on the corner, and that's like all you know of. So you think we go in one of those. Yeah. Or you see these places, and they have these like 1 million coins spread out, and they're selling you these coins. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with that type of option?
Well, really,
other than you really need to know what you're doing when you go in there.
You do really need to know what you're doing when you're going in there. However, what I will say is that gold and silver are so severely undervalued because gold is the primary currency metal, silver's the secondary currency metal. And so with the spot gold and spot silver market, which they don't say spot, they say gold, they say silver, because that's what they want you to think, but it's not. Those are contracts. Right? So when you're going into those places, I mean, first of all, anybody that sells your gold scrap for there is getting really, can I say screwed?
Yeah.
Okay. Because they'll, and I tested this out myself with a lot of knowledge, right? And I went in and I said, okay, I want to see how this works. And what they do is they talk in circles and they'll talk in grams when we're used to ounces in this country. And they'll give you a whole lot of garbage so that they're going to buy it as cheaply as possible. You don't always want to deal with a reputable dealer. If you go into like a local coin shop, well, they're going to be more than likely, they're going to be more knowledgeable on that. I don't know what kind of strategy they're going to give you, right? And I don't know what their buyback policies are, but that's certainly a much better option. Even for your scrap, I would think that would be a better option than going to one of those we buy gold places, because that's really just a huge ripoff. But there are about 3,000 or more dealers just in this country alone. You need to find somebody that is reputable, and you need to have a plan.
And so reputable can mean a lot of things. As an average person who doesn't know a lot about this, how would we know that this is a reputable dealer?
Well, first of all, you want to ask about a buyback policy. Do they buy their coins back? Like, look at Walmart, Amazon, and Costco are selling gold and silver, but they're not buying it back. So you have to have that whole mechanism.
And why do we want them to buy it back?
Well, at some point you might want to liquidate it.
Okay.
So you want, and typically wherever you buy it from, if you're dealing with somebody that's reputable, they have standardized procedures, right? So they're not going to go, oh, well, yeah, we'll give you $5 for this coin. They'll take advantage. They won't take advantage of you. Reputable, you check out BBB, but do they have a strategy? And they can say, oh, yes, I have a strategy. Okay, what is it? And here's even, there's a couple things, but here's even a really important question. What is your exit strategy? Right? At Zhang Enterprises, with the sound money strategy, this isn't just buy gold and silver and hold it forever. Yes, you should absolutely always have a foundation of sound money. But depending upon where we are in that life cycle and what is going on would determine the percentage of your portfolio that you would, that you would hold in gold and silver and where you would be. I am only now 100%, well, not only now, I've been for a little while once my technicals told me where we were. But frankly, I've owned all of that stuff. I'm an ex-stockbroker. What do you think I was buying then? But I also had my gold and silver, and I always recommended that. So you always want a portion of your portfolio in sound money, and you want to work with somebody reputable because you need somebody that understands what's really happening.
So I heard that gold and silver are not the only way you're preparing.
That's true. That's true.
I had a girlfriend who told me that you have some kind of really amazing farm.
I do, and you should come and see it. It's not that far from here.
Okay.
But yeah, having done all of those studies, I know what happens when we go through the transitions that we are in right now, because we are transitioning from this debt-based standard into, if they have their total way, into a purely digital standard, which scares the crap out of me, I'm not going to lie. But yeah, you have to have food, water, energy, security itself, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. These are the things that everybody needs to maintain and sustain a reasonable standard of living.
So would you consider yourself a prepper?
Yeah, I do.
Because I think that
I wasn't before, and do I look like a farmer?
Okay, right. So I would say that TV shows, right, have made us think that preppers are this redneck person with like this stupid hat on and like ridiculous clothes, and they are not an educated person, right? They seem like this totally crazy individual. You're not that.
No.
You're clearly a well-educated lady who totally understands what's going on, and this is a decision that you have made.
Oh, huge decision, yes.
So you're preparing all of the things that you just listed for us. Mm-hmm. And how long have you been doing that?
Well, when the system died in 2008, and I was 100% sure, I mean, I was getting ready to retire in 2008, right? And I was I was in a little 2-bedroom condo. I could lock the door and off I go and travel the world and play and do all of that. And then I watched what happened in 2008. And honestly, I knew that something nasty this way was coming in 2007. But when Shearson went down in 2008, and that's my alma mater, I'm telling you right now, 100% I knew the system died. And all of the quantitative easing, and oh, by the way, Bitcoin was born on January of 2009, and quantitative easing was born on March of 2009.
So you've been working on this for 15 years.
Well, I've been working on it a lot longer than that.
Well, the prepping phase.
Like the prepping
thought
phase,
process of
yeah.
that. It's interesting that you take it back to 2008, because my oldest daughter, who's running around here somewhere, is 13. And I can remember, because I had the same experience with 2008. And I can remember stocking up on food and ammo and getting the skills with that. And I remember she was a baby And I wanted to be able, because you need multiple strategies, right? Am I going to stay here? Can I exit and leave? And so there's a picture of us, and we'll share it with my listeners because they don't actually know this about me. There's a picture of me being able to carry her on the front, and I have this like 50-pound backpack on the back, and I'm like, can I leave and carry her and my bag of food, water, shelter, all the things you just listed? And having those multiple exit strategies in this situation, just like the money, is important.
It is. It's all important.
But then I got more kids, and I'm like, I can't carry stuff and all these kids. We just got to stay.
Well, okay, so if you're going to build your last stand, and that's what I was actually doing here, because my daughters also, with my grandbabies, also live in Phoenix.
Okay.
Right? So
How many grandkids?
I have 4 grandkids.
Oh, okay.
So ranging in ages from my granddaughter just turned 10, and my grandson just turned 18. He's 18.
Oh, wow.
So he didn't just turn 18, but he's 18.
You got self-sufficient all the way down to still at home. Getting there.
That's another conversation.
Okay, you know what? I'm curious. You talked about being a single mom when they were 3. Did you ever get remarried?
No.
Really?
No. I mean, they were the most important people to me, and I could not, frankly, imagine anybody loving them the way that I did. So no, I never did. I was too busy raising them. I was too busy supporting them. And you know what it is, driving them everywhere in the world. Okay, now I'm going to start my 3rd job today.
And I was a single mom for 7 years, so I get it. And
it's amazing you had time to do anything other than that. I had no time.
So one thing that totally drives me crazy about our culture is that we love Disney movies at our family, in our house, right? But the problem is they teach women that your whole life goal is to search for this man, this perfect man that's going to change your life, and that it like ends there, right? Like that is our whole life goal. It's like, and then I saw this meme the other day that was like, that's literally the easiest part, is finding the man, right? And so you're taught that like part of your self-worth is related to that. So as a successful woman who clearly did not think that, you were how old when you got divorced?
I was, let's see, the girls were 3, and they were born in 81, so that was 84. So I would have been, how old was I in 84? Like 30?
I was born in 84. So you've had 40 years of living on your own.
Yeah.
What has that been like? Because it's not what culture.
Fabulous.
Talk to us about that, right?
I travel all over the world. I don't have anybody say, "Oh, don't do that." Now I am just recently seeing somebody that's pretty wonderful over the last couple of years.
That's
amazing. Year and a half actually. But he's not. I say this. He's not succative. He's additive.
Yes.
Right? Do you know what I mean?
When I got remarried, that's how I felt. Like somebody is going to have to add some kind of value. Like we're not doing this where I am taking care of somebody. Right. That's what it seems like you're supposed to do. And my husband, I'm so grateful. My husband is very much like, he's taking care of the kids right now while I'm here. He is very much adding that. And that is such a blessing because it's hard to find.
Well, it is. And that's one thing that I've noticed in your generation, because I see the same thing in both of my sons-in-laws, that they are much more involved.
I think we saw women like you. My mom was a single mom and they had to do it all by themselves. And we're like, we are not doing this shit. This is not okay. We're not doing that. We're not putting up with it. Because it's not okay. No. And it's really nice to see that shift of, and obviously not all of them, but some of the next generation of men stepping up and like actually participating. And whether it's their children's lives or the household, taking care of their wives and things like that, it's really nice to see the change.
Well, it is. And actually, we have one of our producers, his wife just had a baby, and he had 6 weeks of paternity leave. So, and I encourage that because, hey, you were there in the beginning. You really do need to.
Well, and if you think back to when you had your girls, you're recovering. You can hardly function, right? You've got this crying baby. You're not sleeping.
2 babies. I had twins.
Right? I have 2 that are 10 months apart, and they are like totally
be harder,
crazy.
I think.
I always think, I'm like, this has got to be comparable to twins because neither are sleeping. Both have bottles. They both got a diaper. Right? It seems like, so I can't imagine doing that all by yourself.
I mean, don't we all do what we've got to do?
Yeah, you don't have a choice.
I wasn't going to stay married, that was for sure, because, honestly, I don't know who's going to hear this, but Anyway, I mean, really, the reason that pushed me over the edge to get a divorce when I did was I didn't like the control and how he was pushing down my daughters. And I said, that is not going to happen. And so I always encourage them to, I'd say, and when you go to college, and when you go to college, and when you go to college. And so it was never a question, are they going to go to college? Both of them have advanced degrees. I'm very proud of what they're doing in their lives. And then once they went to college, then it was, and when you're 30, and when you're 30, and when you're 30. Because I wanted them to have the ability to support themselves and not sit there or have to make a choice because somebody else was bringing in the money.
I'm so glad you said that because I was pregnant with my third child and I found out my ex-husband was having an affair. And obviously, like you, I wasn't going to stay married. And I started posting on social media about 4 years ago because I had bought my original property before that. I had this RV park that was cash flowing really well. And that was the beginning of what was able to support me and the kids.
See?
If I had not have had that, I would have been what you're talking about. And so I wanted so badly to be able to talk to other women about money and finances. And you do not want a husband who supports you. That is not the goal.
That is not the goal.
That is not the goal. You can have an amazing husband, but your goal is not to be a housewife who knows, and you can be a housewife, but you need to understand your finances, understand the money, and be involved in that process. And literally what you just said was the reason that drove me to start posting on the internet to try and reach those types of women.
Ladies, it's time to redefine the conference experience with the Society of Entrepreneurial Women Retreats. Step inside a world tailored for women just like you, where you can lead, learn, and unwind in style. Our retreats offer everything from insightful investing sessions to fun activities like salsa dancing, boat cruises, food tours, and so much more, ensuring you come back not just inspired, but truly refreshed. Join a community that celebrates you wholly and supports your every endeavor. Ready for a retreat that changes the game? Visit the link in our show notes and find out how you can be part of this exclusive experience.
And beyond that, let's take that one step further because they're lying to you. Wall Street is lying to you.
Yeah, it's
right?
not just their husbands, right? It's everybody that you're learning from.
Exactly.
And you need to be educated enough to follow that process.
Exactly. And that's why sound money, which is physical gold and physical silver, in your possession, not in an ETF, not in an IRA.
We should stop and take a second to talk that through. We are not talking about trading gold and silver.
No, we are not.
We are talking about physically owning these. Are we calling them assets?
They are assets.
Physically owning these assets.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are actually the only asset that is in a long-term positive trend. And I know the markets have been rocky and all of that, and we can talk about a lot of that. But it's the trends
we're talking about that come and go.
But the real trend is not is the stock market going up, is the crypto market going up, is the real estate market going up. That's really a reflection of risk taking and all that money printing, because all that money, when they create it, it's sloshing around in the system. It doesn't evaporate, right? But it is sound money because no. It's the stock markets, the bond markets, all of those markets. You have to look at what the real underlying trend is, which is the purchasing power. I didn't bring it with me, but I happen to have a $10 trillion Zimbabwe note. I probably showed it to you when I was on your show. I'm a trillionaire in Zimbabwe, but what can I buy with that? Absolutely nothing, right? So it doesn't matter. People get blinded by numbers. That's what inflation causes. It causes nominal confusion. So, and an easy way to think about that, if you had a $20 bill a year ago and you have a $20 bill today, nominally, they're identical. They're both $20. It can be the same bill. It doesn't matter, right? But what can you buy with that $20 bill? It's vastly different today than it was, last
Even the
week.
freaking eggs we were talking about, right? How many eggs can you get with this $20 bill now, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So that's the real trend. But creating all of this money, devaluing what's already out there that impacts us, right? That's why you've got to have a foundation of sound money, because what it does is it maintains your ability to purchase the same goods and services over time. They can manipulate the spot market. They do manipulate the spot market. In fact, before they change the accounting, because they don't change behavior, they just change how they account for it. I was in the Bank for International Settlements database on derivatives, and derivatives are just a big, unsubstantiated bet. And in there, and I saw this with my own eyes, it was before I knew print screen, so unfortunately I didn't capture it, but for every 1 ounce of gold that exists, there were 62,000 ounces of derivative gold. That's gold that does not nor ever will exist. But if the market reads it as if there's 62,000 ounces out there, guess what? The spot market, right. And so what are people say? Oh, look at how expensive gold is now. Oh my God. It isn't even marginally near its true fundamental value. And it's not rocket science to know what that number is. And quite honestly, I think it's critically important for everybody to know, no matter what you're doing, you're talking about the cash flow and all of that. Well, what's the true value of that asset? You have to understand that, or you will not know if something is undervalued, fairly valued, or overvalued. Therefore, do I want to buy it? Do I want to hold it? Do I want to liquidate it? Right?
Okay, so Lynette, for our listeners who are like, I kind of understand what you're talking about. These are words that I don't even understand, but I get it, and I understand that I should be headed in this direction. Mm-hmm. I know that Zang Enterprises teaches something like this and helps people make some of those investment
all of
decisions.
the time, yes.
So how do they find you for learning about that?
Well, that's pretty easy because I'm kind of all over the place. But I have a very active YouTube channel where I do teach, and especially about the patterns and all of that.
And is it just your name, Lynette Zang?
You can, yes, you can just search me that way. But also we're very active on Twitter, Facebook, and what else, Chandelier? Instagram. Yeah, all over the place.
Do you have a website that talks about this?
We do. We're working on it. We're rebuilding it to make it much better, but that's LynetteZang.com.
Awesome. Anything else we need to know today?
Wow. Yeah. Stop hesitating. Don't remember what's going on right now really boggles the mind, right? It's tariffs are on, tariffs are off, tariffs are on, tariffs are off, right? That creates confusion, and a confused mind does nothing. That means that you are in jeopardy.
Right, just sitting and waiting for the market to change, to go up, to go down is not doing anything for you.
Exactly. Right? It doesn't matter. You know what our minimum is? $1 silver dollar.
And so for those of us who don't know, that's worth what now?
Probably somewhere, since I don't do that kind of thing, but probably about $35.
Okay.
Or something like that. And I also want your viewers to understand, because this is really important, gold and silver in any form is monetary at its base. So if you own some sterling silver jewelry or flatware or salt and pepper shakers, those are 92.5% pure.
Okay.
Okay? So 14 karat, even 10 karat.
I guess it does. It says 92.5 on the back, right?
Actually, on flatware, it'll say sterling.
Okay.
So if it says sterling, then it's 92.5% pure.
I see it on the jewelry. Yeah.
On jewelry, that's 925. So that's the Mexican jewelry, and that's also 92.5% pure.
Okay.
So regardless of what your circumstances are, there is always a way to accumulate. There is always a way to prepare. And this would not be the time to be doing nothing, because there is not one little doubt in my mind that we are at the very end of this currency's life cycle. And there are opportunities too. So it's not just, everything is doom and gloom. Community is critically important. So please, I encourage everybody to go to their farmer's market, their local farmer's market, go to their local community garden. How about volunteering, getting to create those relationships? Because if it comes down to them giving food to somebody to feed somebody else and feed you, if they know you, guess who's going to get the food, right? Guess who's gonna? And there's always something to do on the farm. You'll have to come and see it. It's quite a remarkable thing. I didn't know what I was doing.
Lynette, I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Remember, authenticity is your superpower. Stay unapologetically yourself, and let's continue embracing our uniqueness together. Make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss the next episode.